Hey all, welcome to my forecast for the upcoming Pisces full moon that's going to happen on around about the 20th or the 21st of September, depending on where you are in the world, because it kind of happens close to midnight. And so, that might be the 20th for some and the 21st for others. But anyway, yeah, interesting times, definitely. In terms of a recap, yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Uranus that we saw last time, that trined the luminaries, which were at that point were in the second house of kind of price and value. That didn't really sort of pan out as expected. I mean, Bitcoin did go up briefly, but then it came down again, and it certainly didn't go into kind of price discovery. Now, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Uranus is very unpredictable, so you're never quite sure which way things are going to go with Uranus. And secondly, I did talk about the kind of counterbalancing energy of Neptune, which is very subversive, particularly when it's retrograde or when it's negatively aspected. And we've had in the last week or so a lot of opposition energy between Neptune, transiting Neptune, and Saturn in the Bitcoin chart. And I think that's certainly not to be underestimated. I mean, if I think back to, for example, I think it was around about 2006, 2007, we had some transiting oppositions between Saturn and Neptune. And of course, it was at that point that, we were kind of on the brink of like a global financial meltdown. So it really isn't a transit to be kind of underestimated, particularly given that Saturn is in the second house, as I said. And also the other thing that I realized, let's just quickly switch that on, is that that Saturn is actually, in terms of the let's quickly just get to the Arabic parts. Saturn sits quite close to the Arabic part of treachery, which I didn't actually realize when I did the forecast last time. So you can see it here, the part of treachery, which kind of sits right next to Saturn in the second house. And so in a sense, this transiting Neptune, which is actually very close to the Bitcoin, well, it isn't actually, it's close to the part of illness, but the transiting part of illness, that it's kind of activating the part of treachery as well as Saturn when it kind of opposes from the eighth house. And of course, eighth house is institutions. It is, as I said, third party funds. So this could be hedge funds and kind of bigger players that maybe clients are investing in directly, and then they in turn are investing in Bitcoins, because it's usually a sort of it's like a third party type of energy. And of course, this can also be governments. It can be tax authorities, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of uncertainty around, particularly in the States, around what's going to happen with that infrastructure bill, whether people are going to have to sort of institute know your customer type of things, which some people don't want. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that, and I think given that Neptune has just gone over the Bitcoin Uranus, which rules the seventh house of kind of investors, people that are kind of invested in Bitcoin, both positively and negatively, because this is the house of significant others. It can also be the house of enemies, so that's just also something to bear in mind. There's a kind of, for me, like Neptune essentially was stronger out of Uranus and Neptune, and that I don't think it helped either that Uranus is retrograde, and that it's coming off of the part of fortune, for the Bitcoin part of fortune, which is very often about increase and about where we have material luck and success, that kind of thing. And clearly, for Bitcoin, that's a group thing that people have to get behind Bitcoin. They have to really have faith in Bitcoin, and when you've got an undermining influence like Neptune creating uncertainty and fear and doubt, then I think then it's kind of only natural that it did water down price a little bit. But anyway, moving forward to this full moon, I mean, again, if we just talk about the lunar phases, we're moving from new moon energy, which, as I said, is waxing. So it's the moon getting kind of brighter and brighter, until we get a full moon, which is the culmination point. So this is when the moon is at its brightest, but it's also when it starts to decline. So in that way, it's very similar to the solstices, for example, in the solar cycle, where you reach kind of peak daylight, like in terms of length of day at the solstice, and then things start to decline from there. The sun starts to lose declination in the sky, and the days get shorter, kind of on the other side of that sort of halfway point. And it's interesting that this full moon, of course, is happening at the equinox, which is when the sun, from a geocentric point of view, crosses over the equator, and it enters the sign of Libra, and this is about equal day and night. So you can see why the sign of Libra is associated with balance, that it's about a balance between day and night in terms of day length, and light and dark. So interesting that at this particular full moon we've got transiting Mercury, which of course rules the second house of price and value, sidling up to the fixed star Speaker. And I do talk about this in my full moon forecast on my YouTube channel, that Speaker is actually a very, very auspicious star. It's considered to be one of the most auspicious of the fixed stars, and it's very much associated with kind of almost gifts from the gods or brilliance. So this could be important over the next 2-week phase, is what I'm saying. There may be a sort of a show of brilliance by Bitcoin itself, where people suddenly start to see, this is what is genius about Bitcoin. This is what sets it apart from other cryptocurrencies, for example, or from fiat currencies, and people perhaps then being willing to invest in it because they actually see its worth, its long-term kind of value, and this could also have something to do with, as I say, that Taproot upgrade that's coming probably in December, but certainly it's very positive in the sense that it's making an aspect here to the Bitcoin Neptune, and on top of that it is being aspected by transiting Jupiter, which is of course a benefic. So if we think that Neptune rules in the chart, it rules the 8th house as a set of institutions and sort of things like tax authorities, but it also rules the 9th house of kind of belief and of faith and of kind of dreams, and foreign sort of influences as well. So it could be that we start to see a show of faith in Bitcoin by more countries like Ecuador, because I think Ukraine is sort of coming online. They're sort of making it an official currency, and so we could see more of that, and that could as I say, be a kind of a show of faith that then makes private individuals want to reinvest again, even though their confidence in the short term might have been sapped by that transiting Neptune. So yeah, that's kind of something to be aware of. And then the other thing is, of course, the sun and the moon. So at full moons, the moon and the sun are on the opposite sides of the earth, so we can see that the moon in Pisces sitting just in the 9th house. So again, this could speak of laws, regulation, but as I say, also geopolitics and shows of faith. So it could be now that we have a kind of real show of faith, possibly from a country that also decides to make Bitcoin kind of legal tender, and that could obviously have wonderful knock-on effects for just feel-good factor essentially. And then opposite to that is the sun in Virgo. Now, as I say, the sun will change signs. It will move into Libra on the 22nd of September. It's not the same every year, certainly in tropical astrology. So it's going to ingress into Libra on the 22nd of September, which is just kind of a day after this full moon. So still very much kind of keying into the energy of this full moon. And from the 3rd house of communication, and of kind of PR and policy and media, it's going to be applying to a conjunction to Mars. And of course Mars rules the midheaven in the Bitcoin chart, so it's quite an important planet for Bitcoin. So as I say, I do think that Bitcoin could get a boost in terms of PR now, possibly by a country deciding to adopt it, or some show of faith, possibly, or some news coming out from, like an Elon, another company that's sort of willing to invest quite heavily in Bitcoin. So those are kind of the sun and the moon. And then they in turn, I think, let's just try and make this a little bit simpler so that we don't have too much going on in the chart. So if we look at the sun, the sun is making two aspects to planets in the Bitcoin chart. So first of all, it's making a square to the Bitcoin Pluto, and this is happening kind of on the cusp of the 5th and the 6th house. So Pluto rules the 5th house of speculation. So it could be that in the short term we continue to see hedge funds shorting Bitcoin, because from what I gather from some of the analysts that I listen to, like Alessio Rastani, I think that's his name, Rastani, hedge funds are sort of on the back foot after a not terribly good year in terms of performance. And so apparently a lot of them are piling into crypto, into Bitcoin, trying to sort of make up any losses. So that could potentially, affect the price of Bitcoin, because if there's a lot of heavy shorting in the market, that tends to sort of drag the price down. But then on the positive side, we've got a lovely trine here to the natal Jupiter in the chart. So of course Jupiter being about expansion and about good news, good luck, that type of thing. It rules the 6th house of kind of health. So I think maybe also a sense that whatever happens now with the sun in the 3rd house, that there will almost be a kind of a show or a confirmation of Bitcoin's health, that it's robust, that it can stand the test of time, and even though it's had some setbacks this year, that it's still come back quite strong. We're still in the sort of $45,000 to $47,000 price range, which is a huge increase on $10,000 in 2020. So I think that bodes quite well for Bitcoin. And then let's just have a look at the moon. So in terms of the moon's transits, we can see here that the moon is also making a positive and a negative aspect. So it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag here. So on the one hand, we've got a square again to this Pluto. So this Pluto seems to be really important. So I do feel that speculation is going to play a role in whatever happens over the next 2 weeks. So definitely the derivatives market, and also don't forget the link, the correlation between Bitcoin and stocks, particularly the New York Stock Exchange, both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. That's if we do have some kind of correction on either of those, it will have a knock-on effect on Bitcoin. It just does. I just think in terms of confidence, investor confidence. So we could have one. Some people are sort of saying that that there are some signs, some bearish signals, that we might be about to have a correction on the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones. So that's certainly a possibility here. And but then on the positive side, we've got the sextile between the moon and again Jupiter. So yes, a bit of it's hard to say really which way this one's going to go. I think it could go either way. And it's interesting too that if we consider William Gann and his sort of time periods, and if we look back at previous crashes, a lot of them have happened around about August, September, October, where you get a high, like an all-time high in the market, and then shortly after that you start to get either quite a major crash or a slow decline. So I think we can't really say for certain which way this is going to go, particularly if we consider that some of the planets are kind of retrograde, and they're about to turn direct. A lot of them are going to turn direct in October. So around about, let me just get my dates. So around about the 7th of October, we start with Pluto, which is going to go direct, and this tends to sort of strengthen the potency of Pluto. So Pluto can be a bit of a destroyer, so I think we really have to watch and see what happens on the derivative markets and the stock markets. And then shortly after that, on the 11th, Saturn will go direct. So Saturn, of course, sitting here quite close to the kind of the midway point, if you like, between Mercury on one hand, which, as I say, rules price, and then the North Node on the other. So it's at about 7 degrees of Aquarius. So it's now going to reverse and start going back through Aquarius. So it's going to go, instead of going 7-6, it's going to go 7-8. So it's going to go back over the descendant, and that could cause a little bit of a sort of a brief kind of pullback, or a brief kind of loss of confidence, or just slightly more serious energy sort of entering the situation. It could then sort of turn favorable for Bitcoin, given that, you know, Saturn in this chart is kind of intercepted in the sixth house. So it, to an extent, it's also about Bitcoin working well, and maybe also having to you know, adapt to the introduction of regulations, possible regulations. I mean, these are going to happen at some point, and I think it's unrealistic to think that it won't. And if Bitcoin is going to have longevity in the long term, then people who invest in it are going to have to sort of come to terms with the fact that they might have to adopt new regulations. But, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, not all regulation is terrible. If you think about the banking sector, and certainly after the 2008 crash, there was a call for more regulation, because there was a lot of cowboy behavior kind of going on behind the scenes, which led to the crash. So, you know, it's not all kind of bad. And then the other planet that's about to go direct is Jupiter itself. So Jupiter will go direct on the 18th of October. So that's still some way off, and we'll kind of cover that when we get to the new moon, which happens around about the 6th of October. But I think in the short term, if we consider that, you know, Pluto certainly is about to turn direct, followed by Saturn, that could also change dynamics in the marketplace. So we'll have to wait and see what kind of happens as far as those two are concerned, because they are generally considered to be malefic planets, kind of overall. Like Saturn can stabilize. It's kind of, it used to be known as the stable one. So in some circumstances it can actually bring stability to the market, but Pluto, generally speaking, is a little bit sort of nefarious, and it can be a bit sneaky, dishonest, kind of undermining. So I think we'll just have to be mindful of that as we move, you know, through the next 2 weeks. Now, Mercury, interestingly, is going to be turning retrograde. So Mercury goes retrograde. Mercury turns retrograde on the 27th of September, and then it remains retrograde until the 19th. So the 18th, 19th of October. That's right. And so it will get as far back as 10 degrees. Yeah, so it will actually go back from around about the 8th or the 9th of October. It will re-enter the third house. So at that point we could have some problems on exchanges. So just something, you know, to kind of be aware of if you are planning on trading Bitcoin, because you know, when exchanges go down, they all tend to go down at once, and yeah, it's just good to have either your limit orders in, or possibly, you know, have your Bitcoin spread across multiple exchanges, so that you don't have the same problem kind of everywhere. So that's just something to be aware of. But on a positive note, what's interesting is that Mercury is going to go over Speaker. So it's going to turn retrograde at, let me see. It's going to turn retrograde at about 25 degrees of Libra. So it's going to go over Speaker, which is at about 23, and then it's going to get to 25, and then it's going to change direction, and it's going to go back over Speaker. And that could be very, very good for Bitcoin. We could see rise of price at that point, definitely. My feeling is that, you know, we could see a spike there. But then as it moves back into the third house, then, you know, it could cause a lot of havoc and confusion and, as I said, chaos on exchanges. So I think it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag the next 2 weeks. I don't really see Bitcoin, you know, moving into its kind of top during September. I know some people think that it's going to, possibly because of GAN time periods, because, as I say, if we are going to see a change in market structure, it usually happens around about September or October. But I've been doing some long-term analysis of Bitcoin, particularly in relation to the upcoming eclipses, which happen in November and December, and I've got a different kind of take. So I'm going to do a separate video on that shortly, which I'll post. So look out for that, and you can get a sense of my long-term kind of predictions for Bitcoin. Yeah, as I say, I think this particular full moon is going to be a bit of a mixed bag. Generally speaking, it's one of those full moons that's kind of asking us to take a moment to to almost prepare ourselves for what is going to kind of come as the planets start to move direct. So it's almost that kind of calm before the storm. So I very much doubt that we're going to see any kind of top in the next 2 weeks. That's my kind of gut feeling. But, you know, never say never, given all these slightly confusing aspects. You know, we certainly could see a temporary rise in price as Mercury gets to Speaker and then goes back over Speaker, particularly as it trines Jupiter. That is certainly a possibility. But other than that, to me, it's, you know, it's not looking all that. So, yeah, I'm kind of staying neutral for the next 2 weeks or so. Yeah, so I hope that's been helpful. Sorry, I'm not sort of saying anything kind of definite either way, but I just have to sort of say what I see in the chart, and yeah, I hope that will kind of, you know, still be useful in terms of a general steer on kind of cosmic weather. Yeah, and I'll catch you again soon for my eclipse forecast.